Well, Donald Trump is probably the most talked about presidential candidate, even though he's not yet a presidential candidate. Officially, he's still making up his mind, but in the process, he's topping some important polls.
Yeah, he's making a huge splash. His show, Celebrity Apprentice, remains a big hit. The Donald is on the phone with us this morning. Good morning, Donald Trump. How are you?
Good morning.
All right, let's get right to the matter of things. I mean, right now, everybody is talking about a comment you made about Barack Obama's high school or college records. Isn't this like so last year? Do we really need to know how his grades were?
Well, I keep hearing how brilliant he is. He was a great student, a brilliant student, except that everything that everybody seems to know is that he was a terrible student, and then he got into Columbia, where he was very average, and then he got into Harvard. And it's sort of interesting because I have friends that have sons that have all A's, and they have tremendous board numbers, and they can't get into Harvard. And why did he go to Harvard if he, in fact, wasn't a good student? So I'd love to have him release his grades and his test scores.
But if we start looking at, presidential candidates and presidents with their high school and college records, then I guess we should look at George Bush, George W. Bush, because he also was a student of questionable means.
Well, maybe you should. Maybe you should. Maybe you should look at me, too. I was a good student, so I don't mind. Okay?
So wait,
listen, Donald Trump, can I ask you this? Listen, I don't want you made some news with the AP. I want to move on to something else. Look, we like you. You're a friend of Good Day New York. But when you run for president, we got to ask you some tough questions. I think this is a fair question. Having said that, I went through your garbage pail, and I found some stuff. Only kidding. But Donald Trump, listen, at an important time in our nation's history, the Vietnam War, you were 22 years old in the summer of 1968. Today, you want to be commander-in-chief. You want to lead the United States military, potentially. But given the chance, somehow you avoided the draft. I want to know how you avoided it and why.
Well, I actually got lucky because I had a very high draft number. I'll never forget. That was an amazing period of time in my life. I was sitting at college watching. I was going to the Wharton School of Finance, and I was watching as they did the draft numbers, and I got a very, very high number, and those numbers never got up to. Do you remember those days? I don't know, you were too young, but it was during the Vietnam War, and they had a lottery, sort of a lottery ticket, and if you were drafted number one, you were definitely drafted, and if, and I had a very, very high number, and they never got up to that number. So in a certain way, I got very lucky.
But I heard you say before, do you wish you had been in the military? Wouldn't you have benefited, particularly somebody who wants to be commander-in-chief?
Well, I went to military school, so that's my knowledge. I went to New York Military Academy, and I understand the military, and I love the military, and I feel very strongly about the military, and that we, especially with the world being so evil, I really feel we should have a strong, not only strong, and even stronger military than we have right now.
Let's talk about some of the comments that several high, well-known people are coming out and talking about some of the issues that you've taken on. For example, Mayor Bloomberg thinks that this birther issue, that you should move on. In fact, let's roll what Mayor Bloomberg had to say.
I think the Republicans are making a terrible mistake in making this a big issue. We have immigration, we have the deficit, we have the economy. Those are the things that the public cares about. And if the Republican Party doesn't start addressing that, they will lose, and they deserve to.
What do you think about Mayor Bloomberg saying that you should move on?
The mayor is a friend of mine. I think he's a great guy. I think he's been a great mayor, and he was very nice to me in that same. He called me he said some really, really nice things about me. Of course, you don't put that on, but that's okay. He also said that, and he believes, like some people do, about the birther issue. And I'd like to get rid of the issue, too. I wish he'd just show his birth certificate and let's go on. But he hasn't, and there's a huge percentage of the public that really wants to see and wants to know what's happening, because frankly he's not allowed to be president if the sinister people are right. He's just not allowed to be there. So I would like to get on. Look, my strength is going to be dealing with China so they don't rip us off like they're doing right now. We have nobody talking to them, and this year they're going to make over $300 billion on the United States and take a lot of our jobs. Dealing with OPEC, because as you just said before I got on, the gasoline prices, I watched that gentleman, he doesn't even know what to do. Gasoline prices are through the roof, and it won't happen with me. Believe me, OPEC is doing it. They talk about all different reasons, the psychology. There's so much oil out there right now. The ships are loaded up with oil. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know where to dump it. OPEC, if you saw Saudi Arabia, just cut production because they want the price to go even higher.
Donald Trump, could your strength be also your weakness? I think a lot of people like the straight talk, that you seem to not have much artifice. But can you really be like that in the Oval Office? And here's my concern, quite frankly. I mean, sometimes you have a grudge against somebody like, be it Columbia University President Lee Bollinger or the Lieutenant Governor Richard Ravitch, and you made it somewhat personal. Now, this is working for you so far as a candidate, but will you allow that perhaps you can't be the full Donald if you should be president, that you got to kind of hold some stuff back, that, you could get in trouble sometimes if you speak like this and you're the president of the United States?
Well, I'm supposed to be a smart person, so I can absolutely tune it down. But at this point, I think it works better being aggressive. I mean, people say negative things about me, and I go after them. Why shouldn't I? If Dick Ravitch was, did a lousy job, I knew it, and yet he's preaching to everybody about something, I would mention he was, he did not do a good job. By the way, I turned out to be 100% right about him. David Patterson told me I was 100% right about him. So, there are things, if people say negative about me, generally speaking, I would go after them. Now, as a president, I think I'd probably tone it down quite a bit.
Let's talk about.
And if I don't, you have to call me and tell me, Donald, please tone it down. I'll take the call.
Let's talk about poll numbers. In a lot of the polls, you are right at the top there. However, new Gallup poll shows maybe there are people who are having some doubts about whether you could be president of the United States. In fact, 50% of Americans are concerned. If you would be president of the United States. Do you look at these polls? Do you watch these polls?
Well, I do look at the polls. I mean, there was one poll that came out, Newsmax, which is a very big organization, and they polled, tremendous hundreds of thousands of people. And they had me at 56%, and Romney was second at 16%. And I said, man, I like that poll a lot. But the same Gallup poll came out and had me in first place last week. Look, I haven't even announced that I'm running. And I will make my decision on or before. You see, and what really bothers me is when they say, I'm doing this for the Celebrity Apprentice, and you see how well it's doing without this. I don't need this to get great ratings on Celebrity. It's already the #1 show on NBC.
Donald Trump, a couple of quick things. Number one, I know the financials, you haven't released them yet, but are you a billionaire or a millionaire? Can you tell us?
You'll see. I think, Greg, you're going to see very, very many times over. In fact, that's one of the things I love about running. Because, I'm a private person. Nobody knows my numbers. I look forward, frankly, to letting my numbers be out. You will be very, very impressed.
All right. Also, what difference does it make if President Obama wasn't the best student in the world? Ronald Reagan, a hero for many Republicans, went to a mediocre college and apparently didn't get the best grades. I mean, really, what difference does it make?
It's always nice to see a good student, but to be honest with you, it shouldn't make a difference, except everybody's building him out like he was this great student, this brilliant guy, great student. But the word is that he wasn't a good student at all. There's a lot of myths about President Obama.
Just where did that word
be straightened out?
Where did that word come from? Where did you hear that? I mean, I think he made some acknowledgments in his own biography.
Sources. Just pick up a newspaper.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. You would think like after so many years after high school and college, we've kind of moved on from that, right? Does that still define who we are?
I think what a record is falsely portrayed, and they do that with me too. I mean, they tell things about me that aren't true, and I hit back. When a record is falsely portrayed, I think it should come out that it's falsely portrayed, especially if you're running for president.
We got to go. Donald Trump, thanks for being on. We look forward to having you back, all right?
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right.